so just to introduce the panel and the investigation that we're looking at. So we're here today, obviously for AGM, but also to talk a little bit about who owns urban Scotland. So this was a kind of a multi-part 10-story investigation done by the Ferret, which also ran in the Herald. A big package like this, and working with the Herald really allowed us to get our kind of teeth stuck into the subject, excuse the metaphor. What we investigated, kind of we wanted to know more about who owned and therefore has control over kind of our land, our buildings, our infrastructure, and for that to help us to kind of understand how well or otherwise that our democracy in Scotland is working. In terms of rural land, Scotland obviously has a long-standing issue with power imbalance. So in 2014, the Scottish Government's Land Reform Review Group found that 432 private landowners owned half of the private land in rural Scotland, which is a pretty epic statistic. When we calculated that, it meant that half of the fundamental resource of the country was owned by 0.008% of the population. But many would argue that this has changed too little with the pace of land reform being pretty glacial. This is something that the Ferret hopes to look at more in future investigations. However, in this case, we wanted to focus on urban ownership. The towns and cities often get overlooked in this debate about ownership. We think that the ownership of cities, and you say a lot about how fair our society is, how respected and how valued different members of society are, and also very aware, especially from health and quality's perspective, how our environments have an impact on our health and well-being. We're speaking in Edinburgh today, and our research as part of the investigation showed that on Prentice Street, our main shopping street, only 9% of the properties there are owned in Scotland. So that's just kind of a rough overview. We've got apologies from a couple of people. So Karen Goodwin, who led this investigation, I'm afraid is unwell, so isn't able to join us today. But Paul Dobson, who's one of the journalists on the team, has thankfully agreed to step up. He has had to step up really short notice and hasn't had some prep time, so we'll be fine today.
Particularly insightful about that.
I'm sure you will be, but it's a disclaimer just in case. We've also got Phil Prentice, to my right as you look, who's Chief Officer of Scotland's Towns Partnerships, 25 years economic development across the public and private sectors, and aims to drive sustainable change to urban centres through collaboration and partnership. We also have Malcolm Fraser, of Fraser Livingstone Architects. Malcolm's also a writer and advocate, including as convener of the Commonweal, and also author of the Scottish Government's Town Centre Review. We were to be joined today by Katie O'Neill, who's a Green Councillor in Edinburgh, who's on the Council's Planning Committee, and as a wheelchair user, she's also aimed to raise issues around urban access while in office. Unfortunately, she's not able to make it to the stage where she might be joining us a bit later, but we're going to kick off in the meantime. So firstly, it would be great to hand over to Paul for a little bit of an overview about the investigation and how we carried it out and what some of the kind of top line findings were. Cool.
Yeah, no problem. Who owns urban Scotland, as we explained, was sort of deep dive into the ownership of buildings, properties, cultural venues, and streets across urban Scotland. So we're talking specifically about Scotland's big cities. I think the reason we wanted to take that on as a project was because of all the good work that's been done looking at who owns Scotland, particularly by Andy Wyman. I'm sure many people were aware of that work. I think that's why we wanted to take this on, because as I said, it was underexplored in an urban context. It was obviously a major journalistic endeavour. It's not easy to find out ownership of buildings and things like that, partially because people make it difficult. And a lot of it is quite distant and private. There's a vested interest in people being unaware of who own certain properties and why they're not maybe being used in the way that communities would like them to be. To explain sort of how we went about the investigation, we were very grateful to have the help of our excellent data journalist Petra Matijewicz, who's over there.
Thank you.
And specifically looked at sort of registers of Scotland data, stuff from the business rate and things like that. And then we're just basically following paper trails to look at various properties around Scotland and who owns them. We also looked at things like infrastructure, so airports, I'm trying to think of other examples of infrastructure, railway, and those then were quite valuable bits of infrastructure, and also cultural venues, because I think that's something that's still under explored as well, and the impact that this ownership can have on cultural venues. Yeah. So I think that was the main objectives of the investigation.
Brilliant, thanks, Paul. So we'll be coming back to some of those topics more on an individual basis, but there's an opening question I'd kind of like to ask our other panellists, so Malcolm and Phil. Just as an opener, what do you think has got better in Scottish cities over the last decade or so, and what do you think has got worse? So could I go to Malcolm with that first, please?
Well, maybe I would make it more than a decade. I've lived in Edinburgh since 1959, and if you ask me, the really important changes in the city are things like I can remember when the water thief, you could smell it from 100 yards away. It was an industrial sewer, and it's now a green thread with kingfishers and otters running through the city. I can remember we were told not to go near the canal, when it ended at Wester Hales, and I was a community architect in Wester Hales in the 1980s and proposed that the infilling of the canal should be unfilled. And then we thought it was just a fan, that never happened. Of course, it has happened and transformed the place, and that's another green link through the city. And I can remember when you didn't really want to go into the local parks because you'd come back with dog shit on your shoes. Now, subtle things like that represent an enormous change, and I think we should be aware of how much more pleasant cities are, how much less toxic fumes are on the street. My mum, who's 91 and a very acute woman, says in her lifetime the thing that's changed most is that the bus drivers are nicer. Say hello to you. They never used to when she was a wee girl. She says they're the most important people in the city because they spread their mood about the city. It's like an infection, positive infection. I thought that was a really smart thing. So I know Ferret's all about, it's supposed to be about bad stuff, but I quite like to celebrate the good stuff sometimes. And Edinburgh, the cities in general, have become indescribably better places to live and to walk about. And COVID was one great thing about COVID is that you heard the birdies, and there was in my leafy park town, Rob's leafy park town, there was parents out with their kids teaching them how to cycle and gaggles of ducks going through the town, and a roe deer was spotted at Waitrose, and a grey heron at the Scottish Widows Pond, and stuff like that. And even after COVID, the traffic's not as bad, but it makes a huge difference. And on the back of that, I've got a proposal in front of the council to use the difficulties of them. They did a lot of street grabs during COVID, closed down streets and things like that. And the nicest one of them is still there, and that the road outside Sheen's primary school is a playground now. And losing that as a through road is not going to hurt anyone. And just to be able to walk down the road with your children instead of traffic is just such a lovely thing. So I've got a proposal to try and do 50 of them across Edinburgh permanently, not just nasty hedge fences creating them, but nice railings and proper street grabs, ideally in central communities or with schools down connecting to the canal, that sort of stuff. And I can't remember what your question was.
What's got better and worse in Scotland's towns and cities over the last 10 years? So.
Well, I'm surprising myself because I can be quite a ferrety, angry person at times, and there's an awful lot of stuff that's really bad. But whether I just end on that, which is
got plenty of chance to get into the fight is done later, don't worry. So it's nice to have a positive overview at the beginning. Phil, what about you?
Decade's a short period of time, I suppose, but I do agree with Malcolm. Sometimes, well, not, but Scots tend to be quite dark and they don't really value what's around it. But on this agenda, if you think about it, Scotland has got a global story to tell. Its culture, its heritage, its DNA lives within its towns and cities. Every single town and city is different, but it's got a brilliant story to tell. We've had to have more and more. And sometimes we just forget about it and lean too much to the negatives. So I think in terms of good stuff that's happened in the decade, there's much more focus on towns and cities. As Malcolm pointed out with his original review back in 2013, these are our true equal hubs. These are where citizens should be able to share space, have access to amenities and services. And you know what? For the last 60 years, we've built a disaggregated economy where everybody has to rely on a car to go 5 miles to see a doctor or 20 miles to go to a hospital. We should actually be nurturing our back end sustainably to our core centres and doing that. So recognition in terms of Malcolm's work originally around the Town Centre Action Plan, we've now got a refreshed version of that in the future for Scotland's towns, because obviously the post-COVID net zero landscape has changed more radically. So again, it's a emerging policy that I think is very, very positive, and I'm quite optimistic about it. The bad thing is, I think the worst thing is that during that decade of opportunity, we had a very limp public sector who did not move in at pace to take ownership and to actually dictate how we wanted to rebuild our towns and cities. We allowed vultures to come in, we allowed them to swoop up after the market cracked and after the financial crash, and we're seeing exactly the same thing happen at this point in time, where you've got lots of vulture funds coming in buying shopping centres and whatever. That's a missed opportunity. Now, go back 10 years, and this is another big thing. There was no money. At least that's what the local authorities and the public sector would say. I don't think we've got that argument now, even in these scary times and the challenges that we face post-COVID and the cost of doing business, cost of living crisis, there is a substantial amount of resource available, whether it's through retail, shared prosperity, the place-based investment programme that Scottish Government has, taken to their land, and it's over an extended period of time. So this isn't just a drop in the ocean, here's some money this year and you're not getting any money for another 10 years. This is you're going to get this money for the next 5 years. So they can move in with confidence to buy assets into the tech control. But I'm still very skeptical about the appetite within the public sector to be principal leaders, and also the skills and the capabilities that are required to do that. So a lot of that's being lost. You know, I find that when you come and say, right, there's a shopping centre for sale, go in and get it. I don't know how to do that. So again, I would lean towards being optimistic with this, because I think we've got a really good opportunity. Everybody's focused on the importance of our town and cities, particularly around how we've changed our lifestyles post-COVID, and also with the climate emergency fund. So I think it's a massive opportunity if we can get it right.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, sure.
Picking up what Phil says, he's completely correct. We have made ourselves open to vultures, etc. And the point made about it should be owned by hedge funds, etc. The main break in it is just how feared we are, just terrified of change or boldness. My principal experiment with the SNP government is how they have not used the powers that are available under the current settlement to own wind power, to do positive things to bring in money. It's not that there's no money there. I've talked, and this relates directly to land and land ownership. I've talked about land value capture as being, people say, oh, there's no magic money tree, and think they're being very clever. But I'm working with 4 community councils at Seafield, so up there there's Leith, there's Portobello, then there's 30 hectares along the waterfront of car showrooms, warehouses, Matalan, and McDonald's, rubbish basically. That is partly it's rubbish because it's designated for industrial use, and as such is not worth much. But it's the waterfront of the wealthiest city in Scotland, and one of the world's most scenic and visited and loved cities. It's an incredibly valuable land. So the council's going to change the designation industrial to residential mixed use. At that point, the value of the land, if the value of every hectare is X, as car showrooms and industrial is designated as residential, it goes up to 5x or 6x. An enormous rise. Landowners buy that, basically. Take it offshore, start to trade it, do all that. But the land is now worth that. So we now go, how do we get infrastructure? How do we build schools? How do we try and get some good transport down there? That has to come out of public purse. Because all that money's been lost. That money is, if you expand over Scotland, I can't remember exactly what I did the figure, it's like 20 billion or something like that a year. And there's enormous value there. There is a thing called land value capture, which was used to build post-war new towns, and was used to build Edinburgh new town, where if council designates land for a different use, they can buy the existing land at current value. That's how they bought the fields to the north of the Norloch. That's how they bought Cumbernauld and Livingstone, etc. There's a small piece of legislation, there's a 1963 Act, which would require a small change to get that back. It's got cross-party support because its biggest exponent in history was Winston Churchill, who's got a magnificent quote about how is it that public interest, investing in a place, the benefits of it are entirely harvested by the very rich landowner, or something like that. So there are Tories in Hollywood that support it, etc. as cross-party, because of course a lot of people would say that's taking away people's rights. It's a socialist sort of concept. So I've suggested to, we don't even have a land commission. We should be doing shit like this, you would have thought. I've suggested to them, if people are worried about fairness, people say, well, it's unfair to take away people's land without them getting the benefit of being able to take it all profit offshore. I say, well, pay them out at 1.2 times existing use value, because 20% is standard developer's profit. So it's quite possible to manipulate these sorts of things. Everybody knows it would make all the difference. I'm trying to, at Seafield, I'm trying to get a privatised version of that, because it's got the railway spur that leads to the docks along the back, which is currently unused. It would be very easy to link that into the trams route. If you do that and get trams on there, the value of the land rises again, because you've got a green transport link up to Edinburgh. So I'm trying to persuade the landowners to get together, to form a company, to get the tram in, and then pay for putting the tram in on the basis that they will get the balance of the profit back, to try and put those together there. But if you're a private citizen trying to fight for that sort of stuff, when that's available to the government, it's really frustrating. So this is a very long sort of side issue, but land value capture is useful. It is a magic money tree, and it illustrates the incredible lack of gumption, pushiness of the Scottish establishment that has all these powers, that can do these things, that's consistently feared to, because some extremely rich landowner would not get an additional billion.
So Malcolm, your problem is typical, but how does an organisation like Ferret engage the professionals who are actually the stubborn movers? In Glasgow, financial sectors, they go on and on about how successful it is. But there's not a shop unit on the ground in the area, and they complain about what happens at night. It's not used. So the planning documents have the right statements, but the executives that give permission for things to be done culturally are doing the wrong thing. How does investigation affect that? Or what is the mechanism for changing?
Well, I think it's useful. Well, it's obviously useful what the Ferret does, but making clear who are the parties responsible for making these decisions that we have to live with is really interesting. At the moment, I'm supporting a residents' union. I was talking earlier about this in Glasgow, where the social landlord wants to demolish 600 full of teachers and cleaners and the odd Buddhist monk even, and replace them with 300 mid-market rent, so it'll be for professionals, etc. In the midst of a housing crisis that would lose 47,000 embodied tons of carbon. And finding out who made the decision that this should happen. They've got a website with a video on it that shows plungers going down and tower blocks collapsing and all the carbon being lost, etc. as being endemic demonstration of how progressive they are. I can't find out. I know the housing minister, I know the zero carbon minister, I know these people, I know senior housing people in Glasgow. Find out who made that decision that everyone goes along with because they're powerful. It's really hard. There's just a lack of democratic openness in Scotland about these sorts of things. And I know that's what you do, is find those things out. That's useful stuff. Andy's work, Who Owns Scotland, they say they are interested in, what's the website? Scotland Sis, that has land ownership in it.
Oh, right.
There's one SYS or something like that. Scotland yeah. That's a good thing. It just needs to be. There are levers in place in Scotland. We pretend we're doing the right thing, and then don't, and then hide it and partially do it, whatever. So there are the right places to push to try and open these things up. The Scotland seems to be a good thing, just is very partial and needs to be given more power. So naming and shaming and finding out who makes these decisions, which are opaque in a nation that says it wants to be open, democratic, etc., is good. That's a kind of partial answer.
I think we have to kind of people with things like freedom of information and press and so on to go and try and find out some of that information. And I think we also have a role in working out what data is available, what data isn't, and questioning why the data that isn't available isn't available, and kind of trying to advocate around that. I'd like to move back down to high streets, because high streets are quite an important part of the work we did. So I'd like to come to Phil quickly to talk a little bit about what can be done to create high streets that work for everyone in a kind of post-COVID era where we're also contending with climate change, and what are some of the moves that would take us in the right direction?
We've just published a new future for Scotland's Times, which is very much around the repurpose and reinvention of our high streets. There's also been, over the last few weeks, debates in Parliament around the retail town centre inquiry from the Economy Committee. So there's a lot of ideas being thrown around, but there's nothing really substantially different from what Malcolm pointed out just 10 years ago. And we need to repopulate. Well, they're not all the same, but having data-driven, evidential approaches. So we've got USP.Scot. That is every single town in Scotland has been data modeled into typology. Lee McEnroe, I guess, from the Centre for Local Economic Strategies helped us with that. So we've got a very good starting point in terms of data, which will tell you what type of town you've got. It will show you comparative towns, and maybe some of those are doing slightly better, so you can learn from them. But the big thrusts that post-COVID net zero, the big thrusts that we are trying to move pace with is getting ownership of vacant sites, buildings that are no longer fit for purpose, like shopping centres that are no longer needed, and to repurpose those being for housing. So I think if you take a look at the housing crisis and we start to join the dots, what we should be doing is doing this at scale. We shouldn't be tinkering about with the odd shop here, one line that industry. We should actually be looking at the scale of the block, taking the whole thing, and then looking at master planning that. So master planning framework 4 has gone through Parliament. We've got new ideas around master plan consent areas. I'm meeting with the pension funds in a fortnight's time to say, look, these guys just extract wealth. We will not allow you to build in the farmer schemes anymore to make the farmer rich. We'll push it back into the centre to do it sustainably. That's going to be the planning framework moving forward. How can we work with you to unleash good private capital investment, not the stuff that sneaks away? And we look at building houses using the local supply chain, using whether it's cooperatives of local builders, who then employ local people who go to school and college to get skills an issue in Scotland, Malcolm just pointed out, we actually do have some decent assets. But you know what, we've got too many public sector agencies that don't talk to each other, and they've all got their data hidden in different places. See if we actually put digital planning forward properly and remove the opaqueness and were more transparent about it, you could go to one central portal and have a digitised Scotland which actually shows you where the infrastructure is needed, where the flood risk and climate issues are going to be, where the housing population is going to be. You could easily do that in the space of a year by just saying the Scottish Enterprise, Highlands and Islands, with Scotland, Transport Scotland, the digital planning office. All this needs to be put into one place with register so we can see transparency around ownership as well. There's not enough of it, there's a big start. But high streets will have to, the world has changed. We are moving away from predominantly retail function to service, mixed use, culture, and all that will be underpinned by people actually living back in their town centres and city centres. We go to Glasgow. Glasgow, if you go to George Square at 6 o'clock at night and look up, there's nothing. There is nobody there. If you were in any other European city on a similar scale, it would be bombed with people. No, it would be. And you think about our demographic. We've got lots of young people who can't afford. We've got lots of elderly people who are just left in a big house. It becomes a burden, basically. And they're actually blocking the housing market because it could be more frequent if there were solutions for aging demographic. Aging demographic could easily plug in the city centre, close to the doctor, get up and car, public transport, lots of amenities, lots of stuff to keep them engaged in society. Which the answers to me are pretty simple. It's just leading more collaborative working to actually get some of this delivered. But again, I'm optimistic about it. I see good plans in Glasgow. I see lots of good ideas bubbling up across the country. And the place-based investment fund, because there's quite a lot of money, we took a wee bit back and held up for demonstrators. You know, tell me that shopping centre, tell me that some of this to happen. And just going through that exercise, keys out and others right across the country where things were going, good things were happening under the radar. And it actually identified some of the better investors that we would want to work with as well. So, again, I'm leaning towards the optimistic side of it.
We have a bit of optimism despite our reputation. I was going to ask you, Malcolm, a little bit about kind of vacant shops in particular and how you kind of think about kind of repurposing vacant spaces for kind of more multi-use, more community use, centrally or residential use.
So there are options, there are levers, and there are barriers with those things. Those empty buildings above the shops in George Square are probably partly because in Scotland we've got a limit on leasehold of 25 years. In England, so a ground floor unit in George Square is very valuable. People who occupy it or own it will not allow others to own property above, like in the normal high street, because if they have a leak or don't look after the roof, that's a serious threat to their business down the bottom. But you can not sell these properties, you can lease these properties. In England, a lease is 99 years, and therefore that's as good as owning. In Scotland, it's a 25-year limit. And that's subtle thing. No one is interested in taking a bill through Hollywood, because I tried to get someone to do that, because who would clap your back at the end of it? It's just not interesting. It's dull as ditch water. That's the reason why the upper levels of Prentice Street are not occupied, while the upper levels of George Street are not occupied. On an ordinary little, on a less salubrious high street, there's tons of vacant property above. Just because nobody cares enough to develop it. And these are in towns and cities where there's huge housing needs. So just on the principal two shopping streets in Perth, there's 100 vacant units. Meanwhile, there are housing associations saying housing needs are so great in Perth, we need to release farmland out beyond the edge of the town, out by the ring road, where everyone will have to have a car, where each divvy box will be disconnected from each other and cost 200 grand each. Whereas in the middle of Perth, there is a vacant flat that can be brought back into use for 20 grand, and the people living there won't have to have a car. They will support the local shops, they'll go to the local bar, they'll walk about, they can walk to the train. I'm not pretending that they absolutely aren't allowed to have a car, but you know, these things are more likely to happen. But there's no, that's, the main problem there is that the people who lobby government have the ear of government. The big, awfully obvious ones are the 100 new homes, social homes on the edge of Perth, etc. And the big house builders that lobby them, as opposed to the 100 flats in the middle of Perth, that's going to take, obviously only 20 grand to do up a flat. There is a bigger amount in surveyors' fees, architects' fees, lawyers' fees, small builders' fees. Maybe government's interested in that. The people who have their ear are the Homes for Scotland, the big house builders, etc. But we just need to get smarter and actually understand it's going to cost less, it's going to regenerate, it's going to be a pound, every pound you spend on that new Diddy box, a huge percentage of that pound is on materials. Every pound you spend on doing up a flat in the middle of Perth, most of that pound is spent on labour. So here's an interesting thing. It creates jobs and it also creates income tax, because these jobs are taxed. So it kind of pulls itself up by its own bootstraps. Though those, sorry, just to give you another opposite lever, those flats in the middle of Perth are designated not as residential, but are designated as retail, because they're above the shops. So every local authority in Scotland is supposed to have an empty homes officer. Some don't, but everyone is supposed to have them. And they are all supposed to be getting empty homes back into use, because we've got a huge homeless problem, and we've got minimum 34,000 long-term vacant empty homes in Scotland. If you add these flats above the shops in the middle of town, I don't know, no one's even counted them. So here's the statistics gap. We don't know, we might have 100,000 empty homes that are capable of being brought back into warm, happy use, most of which will be regenerated communities, because they're existing buildings at the heart. And we're just not bothering with them. There's not enough empty homes officers, and even the ones that are there, apart from ironically perfect laws, are not allowed to look at retail property and bring them back into use. So these are key places. Again, we have levers, we have roles, we have things we've said are important. Just divert a whole load of funding into empty homes officers, give them more money, send them out to find more of these vacant property, give them a bonus for every flat they bring back into use, and allow them to agglomerate uses. So those 100 in the middle of Perth, or let's say the ones in Elgin High Street, because there's a college in Elgin and there's a desperate need for student housing. If there's 50 vacant flats in Elgin High Street, bring them back, run them as student housing, the bars will be full, the corner shop will be full, and Elgin will be transformed by that simple thing. Put one organisation together to do that. Other empty units in Edinburgh, you've got your code base, you've got your Edinburgh Hamada, you've got Out in the Blue. I've helped two of them on occasions. They are bursting at the seams with unicorn startups, with people making things, with artists, with life, all of that. That could spread into, like in West Kilbride on the High Street, that could spread into the ground floor shops too, if there's an organisation to put that together. Phil was getting lots of money.
Well, I think I'm nice on I was recommending partnership and shelter and see good work. And I agree that they've managed to recruit quite a lot of vacant residential accommodation. But there's 45,000 different units. It's almost as if you get one back and then there's another one pops up. So I think there needs to be a much more aggressive approach both from central and local government to act punitively for people who are leaving that problem. When Malcolm first done a town centre review, he must have visited 100 times. We reckon that 40% of the space above the shops was lying empty. 40% right across the country. That's tens of thousands of housing units. We also have to look at the art of the possible. 10 years ago, if you'd landed in Campbell Town, you'd have thought you'd been in another time for that. It was empty. Homes Officer basically has almost single-handedly curated all the different groups together. And if you visit Campbelltown today, it's a very, very different place. All the space coffee shops are now owned by the Housing Association, and there's people living in them. All the frontages are now occupied. There are no retail or commercial vacancies in the entire town. Campbelltown, it's amazing in the space of a decade. So it shows you that it can be done. There's a new cinema in front, lovely art cinema that the community supports. Most of the construction was done by local building companies like Cooperative. The supply chain was local. You know, it just needed that one guy who was passionate about his hometown and he was given the space to actually navigate that and bring the different groups together. So it won the SURF Most Improved Town Award 2 years ago. And I visited quite regularly and live in Argyle. And I'll be honest with you, it's transformable. It works for the people in the town. They've a new leisure centre, they've got a new school, they've got a new hospital, and you know what? Their heads are up a bit. You know, they're actually more confident, people are happier. You just feel that there's a sense of, you know what, we've all done this together. We've made this time better, we've been given permission to do it. They didn't need permission, just went on. So I think you need to look at examples of where this has happened at scale. That entire time is very, very different today than it was 10 years ago, and it's actually working. It's working well with people.
There's lots of exchange ground to cover. We've already covered lots of exchange ground, but we do have to move to our AGM fairly soon. So I would say, firstly, please do check out the package on the Ferret if you haven't already. It's called Who Owns Urban Scotland, and if you search for that on the site, it should come up with the 10 pieces that were written on that topic and covers various kind of other issues we've not had time to touch on today, such as kind of ownership of shopping centres, ownership of cultural venues and nightlife venues and so on. So do check out that work if you haven't already. We've probably got to answer just a couple of questions and then we'll probably better head up to the AGM. So does anyone have a question they'd like to answer? Ask me.
Yeah, I was just wondering about planning democracy. So I know it runs through everything that you're talking about. I wonder as leverage for local people and how that impacts on local democracy. Because at the moment there's such a gap. There's been most recent or a recent report by the Herald quite difficult for local people. I wonder what your thoughts were on planning democracy and how local people can get better access to it and then the impact on local democracy.
Does anyone want to take that?
Well, it's well known, well understood that Scotland is uniquely badly served by local democracy. I'm not very good at remembering figures, but our nearest political representative is miles away compared to southern Belgium or Holland or France or anything like that, where a polity of 250 people will have an elected local representative. We need to reintroduce parish, local community, whatever councils with some power and with some structure and with some funding in order to really do the things that every government says it wants to see happen in communities, but then they give them the power, give them the money to do that. What we're trying to do in Seafield, so it's Leith Links, Leith Harbour, Porty, Craig and Tinney communities are coming together. So we're trying to engage with National Planning Framework 4's requirements for the community consultation or major developments. We're trying to use that as a lever to give us some power, set up a local housing company, association with a major housing association to meet housing provision, the affordable homes that will be required, that sort of thing. But that should be written in to our democratic basis. At the same time, I would suggest that we would also want our local authorities to be rather regulated. So the idea that Aberdeen sits out with the Centreland, Dundee, Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire should be separate. That's one thing. They want to work together. Dundee and Angus, Edinburgh and the Lothians. And it's not very difficult to do that in Scotland because that's how the health boards work. So we need our local authorities to be, in my view, to resemble our health authorities, and then with another layer of democracy underneath it, with more focus on the local health
Just before you talk about the idea of like foreign ownership, sort of being this idea of like building in distance. But from your experience and from the reporting, and obviously I know that you came onto it on late, but just how that dynamic has affected sort of transparency, accountability, and the actual investigative process. Like how has that affected this sort of offshoring of ownership? How has that affected the process of journalism to either like sort of right reply and things like that?
No, it's a really good question. I mean, the journalistic process of this was. The journalistic process of this investigation wasn't challenging because of what you mentioned, like contacting people overseas, potentially shell companies to get rid of reply and things like that is really difficult. And I mean, that's a huge part of our reporting is trying to get a say from them and not just be projecting what the critics say, but also how they view their ownership of Scottish property. So I'm sure they see it very differently from a lot of the critics and pieces to do. And I think that is that angle of transparency, that distance that these companies build in so that they are less accountable, essentially. But there's also the transparency angle that I think the audience members mentioned, which is how difficult it actually is to find information within Scotland and what is available to you. And we're investigative journalists who have time in our jobs devoted to actually doing that, and it's difficult for us to do that. So if you're looking at this from an accountability standpoint, and from local communities wanting to find out more about who owns the buildings around them and what they can do about that, they just don't have time, they don't have resources. We're not a particularly well-resourced organisation, obviously we've got to do these investigations thankfully, but small community groups are not going to have the capacity or the money to track down who these owners are. And so I think that's the goal of the Ferret Way, which is important, but also it would be good if we didn't have to do that, and if it was easier for other groups to be able to do that locally, and therefore challenge distance that is built into the operator. I think that's one of the things that we can help with. We can try and train and make the information we develop available, and the databases we develop available. But really what we need is, I think what Phil and Malcolm mentioned, is that it's more integration of the resources that are available so that people with individuals can do that themselves.
We probably need to wrap up then, unless there's a deeply urgent question that anyone else has. But otherwise,
very quick.
we're very good.
I'm not convinced that the data issue which the journalism can expose is the most important issue. High Street in Glasgow is managed by City Properties, which is the council. The sewage running under the shop units, which should have been dealt with 100 years ago. And the problem is that it's the attitude within the sections of the council which say this is not strategically important to deal with that, but to look for the big project, to look for the money, go to the pension fund. And I'd like to see Ferret making the effort to report the efforts that people make and don't succeed in getting their local project off the ground. So Merchant City in Glasgow, 2 weeks ago, the planning committee says that the car park there, which has the only trees on in the city centre, which the local people have been lobbying for to be a park there, just a weeny little park, is to be shot, is to be waxed now. They lost by one vote that campaign after years of effort. I would like to see big articles on the efforts that people are making and are frustrated in order to inform us about how that frustration can be alleviated. And switching to data is, I'm afraid, not the issue.
Okay, I think.
Yes, of course you can. So yeah,
Sorry,
but for response.
Democratic accountability of the officers are focusing on what people want then call them. The point I was going to make was the work.
With respect.
How? Well, I mean, I used to work in the public sector. I was the head of planning and economic development, etc. I was always accountable to the local people. There are democratic structures where people can feel that. I understand very often local authorities is the main problem. Either through lack of consultation and engagement, and I know that some of the properties you're talking about, first of all, have loads of ideas that are actually left to fall into further detail. So again, it's a mixed bag, but the brief point I was trying to make was, as a practitioner, I fed in a lot of this as Karen's investigation progressed. I would like to commend you for a very, very good piece of work, and I would love to see more of that happen. I think people do need to be called out, and the ownership piece is very important because ultimately it gives control. I would love to see Stockton being replicated up here, where the municipality went in and bought the town centre and engaged with people and transformed this, because it was down on its knees and now it's rising back up again. Instead of having empty shops, they've got outlets, they've got a big urban space, they've brought the river Tees back into play, they've got the tunnel on top of the main road. You know, they've done a lot of good things by stopping planning, being democratic, open about it, but also being really ambitious and using all of the public works looking for potential to borrow long term, using the public sector economy to actually fix the thing. So it can be done radically, but the point is, keep working, because that was actually being really, really helpful piece of work. And at a time whenever everybody was focused on that sector, the ownership of this business, these guys flagged it up, and that's really well.
Brilliant. Thanks so much to all our panelists for taking part, and we'll just give them AGM business now.
I'm just going to say thank you to the panel again. Reminded me, that was amazingly positive, optimistic, uncharacteristic. On the bleak side, how bad things are. Clearly, one of the points of the journalism we do is to inspire discussion about how to do better. So that's really good. Also reminds me that I'll go back to campus now.
Yes.
It's been a while. All I need to do now is introduce Audra, who's going to take us through, who's the chair of the board, and is going to take us through the annual meeting.
Right. Thank you, Rob. Okay, and thank you again to the panelists. So just quick round of if anyone wants to get a drink, you're welcome to move around. This next bit is the AGM portion of our event. So we haven't had a live in-person AGM for a few years, as Rob mentioned. So thank you very much. And so we are going to go through some highlights. There's really only one vote we need to do as a membership, which is about not having an official auditor. So I'll put that up. Hopefully we'll see in just a minute. It's so bright in here. I hate to complain about
Sunshine as well.
in Scotland, but can you see anything? Right, so Nick. Oh, he's doing it. See if he can make it dark. Right. Can you see anything?
I think he's going to close these.
If not, we'll just see to it.
We can see it okay.
Yeah. It's not anything that's like super detailed or beautiful anyway, so
They're coming in to see if they can turn the lights off.
I think it's okay.
Okay.
So you can see it. So Nick, do you want to come on and go through the highlights?
Oh yes, sure. Hi everyone, yes, I'm a reader director at the Ferret. I'll try and keep this a bit brief, just because obviously again, it's been a really big year for the Ferrets. I mean, there's some really, really big wins. So just here are some of the top line stats. No, you can see it there actually. So stories been viewed over 1.2 million times and 20,000 plus podcast downloads. You may know that we relaunched our podcast this year. Paul is now well, I'd say visible bit, so it's all audio, but he is an active member of that with Ali Ryan. Doing over 100,000 interactions on social media, and obviously, as you know, Ferret, we're very keen on being very sort of open and transparent with the data we use, and so other people can sort of scrutinise and independently figure out it as well. So we have about over 5,000 data sets and sources and documents published on the website to date. So yeah, so for fact's sake, you'll see it's also our fact checking service. It's also got itself a rebrand this year. We've had some big ones. I mean, that report made me think about the recent one about 15-minute cities as well. And also some of the stories like on the margins, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail as well. Also, I'm going to flag out for today's heralds. We have Paul. So this won't just be the Paul Dobson show, I promise. But Paul on the front page of the Herald today, reporting on security breaches by police forces. Rob tells me this is a follow-up to a piece that was published 6 years ago, so you know, sticks around. And so here's some of the memberships. As you know, we're a cooperative, so our members and other subscribers are the organisation. So we have 2,162 paying members and an additional 2,800 sort of Ferret Underground newsletter subs as well. And there's a pie chart saying pie chart of things. I won't go through that in too much detail, but it sort of really shows how people are continuing to support Ferret. Other people here, so the Ferret wouldn't exist without our membership. So you can see how diverse our memberships are. Obviously, it's been a tough year for all journalism and for everyone during the cost of living crisis, but it's really important to see people still valuing journalism as a core part of things that they contribute to. So that is a really, really tough time. Ferret is still being supported by our membership, which is what's really exciting about the Ferret structure. Next, please. And as finances, I'm not very big on finances, so I'll be brief, but the line going up generally is a good thing in my, obviously I'm an economist by nature, as you can tell, but I'm coming predominantly from membership, grants, funding, and content sales and publishing. We've already mentioned some of the partnerships we've done with the Herald this year. So you can see our annual recurring revenue rose by 5% from September 2021 to March 2023. And is just over, nearly £84,000, which is huge for a small media outlet like us. Like for us to be able to have money to invest in our journalists, invest in our journalism, and sort of support our readers. So yeah, so uplines are always good.
So I can add something to this as well. So one of the things that's important that Nick is pointing out the front page of the Herald. So you probably know membership is a big portion of how we bring in revenue to support journalism. It's about 40%. Another 40% is from grants and funding, and which is always kind of under threat, increasingly now as well. And then that last 20% is right now through content sales, co-publishing. So these deals that we have with the Herald is a really kind of key important thing that we continue to cultivate and grow over the last year. So.
Sorry, I just thought the pie graph you had just before showed that almost all of your funding came from.
This is the previous thing.
That's just the membership.
That's just
okay.
the membership types.
Yeah, we have different ways.
I didn't put a pie chart that showed the 40, 40, 20. So that's why I thought I would point it out.
Yeah.
But that's a good point. This is just membership for example.
And so, in fact, when we study journalism, you want journalism to be read, you also want it to be read by those who are in position to make change that the journalism represents. So, our story has been cited 9 times, probably even 8 times in Westminster. And again, so we know that people are listening, we know that this is being directed somewhere. And that is always key. Obviously, it's not enough in of itself, but as described on the panel, it can help give the raw materials and raw data that are used to either lobby their MPs or MSPs, or actually involve the policymakers themselves to play a more active role in that debate. So yes, and so for example, following inquiries from the Ferret, proposal to investigate eating beavers as a way of limiting their numbers has dropped. Sentence you shouldn't really need to have impact for. And also looking at, and it sort of ties to what we talked about earlier, so after the Ferret journalists found out the councils were massively underestimating their climate emissions, it emerged that ESS was looking into that sort of reporting. Obviously, we know we need that data to be reported accurately, and journalism was able to direct where it needs to be improved. And after we revealed the pension funding for MSPs in Edinburgh University held shares in sanctioned bank Spearbank, the trustees of the fund announced that they would divest, and the university would review its investment. And this is showing how we work with other outlets. So we co-published with Legacy Media also
Sorry.
we've also had our stuff picked up by other media outlets such as Dobson, Press and Journal, and the Independent Press Association, and many others. So helping them sort of amplify the reach of Ferret, which is a really big benefit for us. And again, we've had our reporting influencing conversations with MSPs, looking at power, children's rights, health, transport, and the environment. Look at, an MP calling for an inquiry into the number of jobs advertised below the national minimum wage while citing the Ferret, as well as, again, these partnerships with the Herald, looking at things such as price sales, looking at the cost of living crisis, how the local issues and how councils are responding to local issues, and as we discussed earlier, the viewing in Scotland. So this is also just to highlight some of our impact as well across the board. One of the projects that was really key, which Karen Goodwin, who unfortunately can't be with us, led on, is on the margins, which was making sure that media and journalism is not closed off shop, that it can actually work with and represent those who are not, have not been represented in their media. So early 2022, EDSA teamed up with citizen journalists Tam, Peter and Michelle to uncover crises around addiction, homelessness and poverty, and it resulted in our Ferret's first documentary that was filmed in collaboration with BBC Scotland, and a written report investigation on the Ferret's website. I think the documentary is still on BBC Scotland. It is epically amazing. If you haven't seen it, I really recommend it. It's really, really incredible to see. I think the Ferret co-op model Ferret is trying to bring people closer to our journalism, so it's not just preaching at people, and this took it another step further, seeing how we can ensure that it's not just stories being told about people can tell their stories, and it being seen as a core part of journalism moving forward. So I think that's what's been really exciting about that project. And we were award winners this year, where we won not we, I think I'm getting credit for it, this is the journalists and the editors and reporters, won the journalism team of the year at the Scotland Press Awards for Who Run Scotland, which again is still live on our website. Please check out if you haven't already. It's really exciting. Another co-publication with the Herald and examining the ownership and power in Scotland's economy. And we also received a mention for the runner-up for the podcast of the year for our show, which again we've just relaunched. So please subscribe, wherever subscribe, and all that usual blather. But yeah, so it's been a good year, and we've also got a physical presence for the first time ever. Yes, I think first time ever we've got a physical presence in Dublin Hill. We're working with the Great Dublin magazine. It's a community newsroom which is down just off Victoria Road in Glasgow. We've already hosted a number of drop-in events, training sessions. People can drop in with hired desks if they're working from home and wanting a bit of a break from the front room. I've been there a few times. It's amazing. It's a really vibrant space, and encouraging that sort of lost art, people dropping in to actually pass on a tip in person and just to learn more and to actually engage with journalists directly. So if you're through in Glasgow, please come visit it. It is awesome, and it's really bright and colourful, which is also nice. We've also really been there to work behind the scenes to sort of make sure that we're supporting our journalists, because obviously we love journalists, there being no journalism. So to respond to the cost of living crisis, the daily rates for staff has been increased. And I'd like to thank all the board members for taking quite a lead on that. We've also implemented a discretionary funds program to assist with people's costs that they like for equipment and services they need to do their journalism. That should not be borne by the journalists themselves. And the Ferret, while we're not the biggest company in the world, we need to get in here and sort of shoulder some of those costs ourselves as an institution, and also improving some of our human resources coverage and support, and to better support line management and sort of just general welfare for journalists. And also, this has been launched today. We can never talk about it. That we have just recently signed a bargaining agreement with the National Union of Journalists for Ferret, and we have a file with a chapel at the moment, and this was signed 2 weeks ago. So it's as hot off the press as it is for the Ferret. So that's really good. So we've got a statement with John Toner and ourselves. I think it's a really important time, especially at a time where union
information is available on the website. We've got a special page specifically called Transparency that we update on a semi-regular basis. But you can also find our financials there that we file with the FCA, and then a lot of the information that these slides allude to. So if you've got questions about those or you want details, that is always available. So any questions or anything about any of the stuff that we've covered? Resuming. All right. So yeah, Rachel.
I think there was a question from behind me. Sorry.
The website's a bit frustrating to use. The plans to improve it.
I mean, the website is a constant iterative process, like every website is. I mean, if there is a recurrent issue, please flag it. Send a message to the team. I don't know the website at all. So if there's anything, if there's a recurrent issue, we can have a look
Let's
at it.
chat after this, and we'll note down if there's anything specific that we don't know about yet that we can address. But yeah, I definitely want to make note of that. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, so we've got a motion to disapply audit requirements. So this is really the only official vote that we need to do today as part of our AGM. So just quickly read it out, just to make sure everybody can, just in case you can see very well. The governing document of the Ferret Limited permits the directors to disapply a requirement to appoint an independent auditor, provided the cooperative meets the conditions set out in Section 83 of the Cooperative and Community Benefit Societies Act of 2014. This states that organizations may opt to disapply the requirement for independent audit if assets of the cooperative at the end of the preceding year of account do not exceed £5.1 million and turnover is less than 10.2 million. We are way below that. So as the Ferret Media Limited meets these requirements and has produced independent accounts, which we do, and it's on the transparency page, it is proposed that the society again disapplies the requirement for independent audit, as this would be a significant additional expense. So basically, we're not required to do it, and it costs a lot of money. So we're asking the membership to agree that we should, we don't do it basically.
Why are you asking?
Pardon?
Do you ask every year? Why do you ask?
Yeah.
It's a formal procedure that we need to go through.
You need to pay your part.
Yeah.
So have you ever had an external audit ever in the years?
No.
You've never needed one?
No, I mean, we publish independent accounts and kind of run transparency reports and so on, so everything's very much kind of in the light anyway. So,
we just don't go, so we do the independent accounts, but we don't necessarily go through the auditing process because it gives the additional expense.
So what mechanism does the treasurer have for getting an independent scan of what has been produced? Just for example, and I'm not a criticism in any way at all, if £200,000 being put down to contractors, has somebody independent of the treasurer just gone through that to check?
Well, it's not done by the treasurer, it's done by an independent accountant who does, they actually do they produce the accounts for us. We don't
So
do
you've
the
got an
accounts.
independent accountant?
Yes. So any other questions or points? Can I have a motion to vote? Yeah, second? Right. All in favor of disapplying the audit requirements, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much. Okay, so a few last things. I want to do a quick thank you to our, as you might imagine, AGM is around the time, because the AGM will push it a little bit later than we normally have it. Is around the time that we do our board switchover. So this is an opportunity for us to thank the folks who are rolling off or who have rolled off. One is as you see today, Rob Edwards. So we have been so grateful to Rob and his participation, leadership, and humor, and everything else that he's brought to the board since the founding. So I think the board is going to feel quite different with that being there, Rob. But we understand that this isn't like everything you want to do in your life, so. So thank you very much, Rob, for your service there. Karen Goodwin is one of our co-editors who's unfortunately off ill today and can't be with us, but she has been working incredibly hard on the board for several years now and is stepping back. And we've got two new journalist directors who are going to be joining us. We're going to talk about just a moment. And lastly, Susan Coachry, who was one of our reader directors, has finished her term, and she's rolled off as well, which is good timing because she's started a big day job. So we're really pleased with everything that she brought to the board and what we did. So thank you very much to Rob and Karen and Susan. And coming up ahead, we've got 4 new joiners who are coming on. So Paul and Petra, who some of you might have met at the table earlier, are joining the board as journalist directors. We're really, really excited to have you both joining. We've also got Susanna Fitzgerald, who's joining as one of our reader directors, and Sean McNamara, who unfortunately can't do it this day. I think he chose his wife's birthday over this. I don't know why. But anyway, we're really, really excited to have all 4 of you join the board coming up. So anyway, that is what is coming up ahead. We've got a couple of other things that are happening with the Ferret that you'll kind of be hearing about more and more. One is the fact that we are hiring a new business manager. We're in the process of doing that, which is really, really exciting. And I think Sue will probably be, you'll get a chance to meet them when they come on board through other things that we're doing throughout the year. So hopefully maybe some more online events and in-person events, and then of course all of us live. So with that, I think I'll make one last plug for the survey because it's a really important thing for us to hear a bit about what you care about, what you'd like to see more of, how you find us. So Iris Passe in the back has been doing our social media, doing an amazing job, and we'd love to make sure that what we're doing with social media, with newsletters, with the website, helps us get the information to our members, to our readers. It's very, very important to us. So please, please, please take a few minutes to do that survey so that we can continue to improve the things that we do. And make sure that it has your input. So anyway, that's it, I think. Is there anything else, Rachel? Am I missing anything?
I don't think so. We're offering pastries.
Did they bring the pastries?
Not yet. I can go and chase them, but we should theoretically have hot drinks and pastries on offer after this. So I think if people want to kind of stay and chat to people and mingle a bit, then please do.
Pastries, yeah.